Today we're going to be focusing on talking about the links between debt and domestic abuse and how we can offer support. I'm Rachel Duffey. I'm the Chief Executive of PayPlan, and for anybody new to PayPlan, we are a national service and we provide free debt advice and debt solutions to anybody who's struggling with debt. And I'm really pleased to be able to introduce Chris Harris from Broxtowe Women's Project. So Chris, if you could just explain a little bit about who you are and your role.
Yes, I will. Yeah, I'm Chris Harris. I'm the Partnership Officer at Broxtowe Women's Project. We're a small team of 8 people who are based in the borough of Broxtowe in Nottinghamshire, for those of you who don't know where that is. And we offer the traditional outreach services that all domestic abuse organisations offer. But we've got an extended project which I lead on, which is working across the country with businesses and organisations to raise awareness and look at policies and procedures to support their staff and clients around domestic abuse.
Okay, we've been talking to each other for a couple of years now, I think, haven't we?
We have,
and
yeah.
We've identified that there's sort of a lot of commonality in what we do and what we see, and there's sort of quite strong links between debt and domestic abuse. Many people experience both, and often sort of both can be about control and lack of freedom and sort of barriers to seeking help. So it's been, I think we're certainly at PayPlan, we're very proud of the partnership that we've had and learned a lot from you over the last couple of years. But particularly we thought we'd do something this week because it's Safeguarding Week, isn't it? So if you could just tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's National Safeguarding Week. It is about the 3rd year that they've celebrated it on a sort of larger scale. It's led by Ancraft Trust, who are based in Nottingham as well. They mainly look at sports and learning disabilities as their specialism, but I've seen this week that there are so many large organisations and safeguarding boards that have got behind the movement. And one of the themes is to look at causes, of which one is well-being, which is really a huge part of what we've done in the last 2 years, is looking at your well-being strategy for your whole staff and client group. And it's really about starting conversations so that people don't feel uncomfortable talking about safeguarding issues, of which domestic abuse is a large part. So.
And I think it feels, I'm sure we'll come on to this, but particularly pertinent at the moment with lockdown and with the pandemic. And I think we're both
Absolutely.
Probably very busy at the moment,
very much
sadly.
So. Yeah, very much so.
So perhaps if you could just start off by talking to us a bit about, what does domestic abuse mean and so how we can spot the signs.
Yep, okay. Obviously for us, domestic abuse is around power and control. It's the model that we use and it's what we talk about. The definition of domestic abuse talks about physical abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, but it also talks a lot about coercive control. And I think coercive control is something that we've seen escalate during the last 8 months where we've been in the COVID period. And the other form of abuse that it talks about, obviously, is economic abuse. And that's what we're really going to come on to and focus on as we move forward. We need to accept that domestic abuse happens within any relationship and it can happen to men and to women. So although we're a women's organisation, we work with all family members and we support all family members and we signpost on where appropriate. And the current stats show that sort of 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men will experience domestic abuse in their lifetime. But we know that those figures are probably not as accurate as they could be because they're police figures and not everybody goes to the police, as we well know. So that's an overview of what domestic abuse is. But obviously there's a lot more minutiae within that we need to be looking for.
And I think some of the signs can be very subtle, can't they? Some are much more prominent. And in terms of what people should be looking out for if they're concerned, is there anything you can give us on that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's fair to say that people are worried about saying they're in an abusive relationship if there's no physical violence. And actually, we shouldn't think about it just being around physical. In actual fact, what we've seen escalate during the last 8 months is coercive control. So asking people to do things that they wouldn't normally do, asking them to perhaps take out credit and debt against their name, going and perhaps doing petty shoplifting or going to the food banks illegally because they don't actually need that, but being forced into those habits. The other thing is to look out for people who are maybe less social than they have been. are changing their presentation, so they're maybe not dressing as well as they were. They're attending less meetings, they're not coming to functions. And then particularly during this time where you've got people that don't attend the team meetings that are on Zoom or Teams or any of those things, or perhaps they keep their cameras off while they're on because the perpetrator is in the room. And a big question we've all had to ask ourselves is home a safe place to work, or are we actually enforcing somebody to spend more time with the perpetrator in that setting?
Yeah, and I mean, we know that, you know, just taking people with financial problems in isolation, there can be many barriers to seeking help, and if then there's an element of control on top of that, it's really going to make the problem a lot worse, isn't it? And already, on average, people who have a debt problem can take up to 2 years to actually seek advice, and when they do, we know that there are feelings of shame and embarrassment around it, which, you know, considering how many people struggle financially these days, it's sad that we haven't moved on from that, really, but those feelings still exist.
I think one of the things as well that I'm well aware of, and we spoke about this when we very first met with your vulnerability team 2 years ago, but another statistic that we've sadly seen over the last few months is the rise in suicides because of their debts spiraling out of control, not being able to reach out for help, the domestic abuse perhaps escalating. They can't get to a safe place to make a call to either yourselves or to us or to get support, and they can see no way out. Because at the minute, none of us can see where the end of all of this period of time is going to come either. So
no. And do you think that many people just don't know how to seek help or where to go to, and that's part of the problem?
I think there's a difficulty, because as soon as we make numbers available or safe spaces available, they become unsafe. Because the perpetrator knows. So you make every chemist a safe space to go to, and then you say, well, I need to go to the chemist, and they'll say, why are you going there? And they'll go with you. So you can't phone anybody. You can't make that call. It's very difficult. There are obviously lots of help available. It's whether they can get to make the call in the first place or send the email that's the important thing.
Yeah, and I've obviously, some of the research that we've done, we can see that there are practical tips out there as to what you can do around if you're searching on the internet and that sort of thing. And I think at the end we're going to come on to sort of just signposting people to both of our websites, and hopefully there's lots of information that's helpful there. I mean, I think as well, certainly from our point of view, one of the barriers that that we overcome from a debt point of view is that people have struggled so long for such a long period of time when they seek help, that they feel as though, even though things might be pretty bad the way they're experiencing them, at least they feel in control of them, and they are making the decisions on a day-to-day basis in terms of, well, I know things are bad, but if I let somebody else in, they might try and change my situation in a way I'm not comfortable with. And actually, in many respects, debt advice is probably much simpler than people expect it to be, because people are so used to, certainly our clients are so used to living in a certain way, and often they're going without food, they're going without heat, and they're paying for their debts, and they think, well, if I let somebody else come in, I can't make those decisions. And a lot of it's a sort of psychological thing. It's actually about being able to overcome those barriers and think about your life in a different way. And certainly from our point of view, the first thing we have to do is say to people, change the way you think about how you're handling your finances. Don't worry about paying these debts as a priority. Your priority is to look after yourself and your family. And then we look at what's left for your creditors. And no bank is going to expect you to starve yourself or to not be able to clothe your children in order to pay for your debts. But people have got so used to living a certain way, it's very difficult to sort of break that cycle.
Yes, and I think there's two aspects. The one is that during an abusive relationship, they will have been controlled, and everything that they do and everything that they are told will be controlling them, whilst they feel completely out of control, that there's nothing they can do about the situation. When you then put a problem like debt in front of them, they don't know how to control that because they've not been in control previously. So I think they either try to ignore it altogether, so that if we don't even think about it and if we don't tell anybody, then nobody can control us again. But then handing that control over to somebody else feels like you're losing that again, and that's quite scary.
Yeah, when you've just got it back in some respects.
Yes. But as you say, if we can help them to understand that, it will make them feel a lot better and it'll make their lives a lot easier. But it's getting them to come to that point to actually even say, and my money is out of control. None of us want to have to say that in life. So.
No, and I think, you know, for anybody who's sort of new to the world of debt advice, I mean, we are just one organisation, and we see 10,000 people every month come to us. You know, so any feelings of, you know, of this not being a common occurrence are wrong.
Yeah.
This happens to so many people.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people find it very empowering once they seek help. It's just getting that over that hurdle. And you know, we've had clients who have said to us, you know, once they just sort of release and let somebody in to help have those conversations, quite quickly you can feel as though you are moving on and have that element of control back in quite quickly. Our aim really is to help prioritize what's important in terms of somebody's finances and help them move on in a way that they are comfortable with. And you know, in many respects, paying the debt is secondary to that. Yes, you do need to repay your debt if you can, but do it at a rate that's affordable.
Mm-hmm.
You can't give somebody something you haven't got, and if you haven't got it, then you've done your best, you know. And so it's sort of initially seeking that help that I think is in many respects the biggest obstacle to overcome. But we've also done quite a lot of work together, haven't we, in terms of how we can do it safely,
Yes.
and about how we don't put anybody at risk by opening up those conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. I mean, if we can get people and help them to lead them to the point to be able to talk to both organisations in the first place, they've opened up and said, I'm experiencing domestic abuse, and then they've experienced debt. And as we know, the referrals come both ways. So they may come to you first, they may come to us first. The joy of our partnership is that we're then both able to support them. And as you say, find a way forward that is safe for them. We know that in some situations that they may still be with the perpetrator. And we don't want to escalate any risk to them or their children or any other family members that may be involved. So it's finding that way, and that's what safeguarding is all around. That's why we're doing that this week. Safeguarding is about making sure that the whole scenario is risk assessed, and we then find a way to move them safely forward.
Yeah. But going back to this point about a lot of abuse can be around coercive control, and it can be sort of financial rather than physical. I mean, there has been quite a lot of awareness recently around this, hasn't there? But I think it probably still has some way to go.
Yes, there's been a lot of work, and you know, I was thinking about our 2-year journey and thinking, well, actually, you started your journey long before it reached the level of discussion that it's now at, and it's great that there are more organisations now looking at it and taking it seriously. But economic abuse in the domestic abuse bill changes that are going through the Lords at the minute will be included in the definition. And it will look at the whole range of economic abuse, because as we know, it's not just about your cash, it's about the whole range of things that fit underneath that definition. Surviving Economic Abuse have done a lot of really good work to drive this project forward, and many of the big financial organisations have been involved in that work. And their resources, which are available via links on both of our websites, are accessible for both professionals and for individuals, and well worth people taking a look at to understand in more simple terms what they can do and how they can get that support.
Yeah, and we've seen certainly with the banks and the lenders that we're talking to, is that there is a real recognition out there that people do need to take this seriously now, that they do need to offer the support, that most of these organisations will have specific teams to deal with people who are, you know, in particularly vulnerable circumstances. Everybody's happy to take time over this, and certainly, I mean, when we've interacted together, it doesn't matter how long it takes, does it? As long as we do it safely, that's the priority.
Exactly. And one of the things that we are quite lucky with our project is that we have got what we call our wellbeing project, again linking into that whole safeguarding theme of it's not just about a crisis, it's the whole look at how do we then restore people's confidence, how do we restore their ability to cope with situations, and how do we restore their well-being so that there is a future. And part of the work that we do together is by using the resources that you've developed for us to do training with our families, to look at savings and look at understanding how to manage money. And that's been a really important part of the work as well, because there is a learning process that needs to take place afterwards to recover from the impact of being in debt.
Yeah, and I know that we've talked about some things that if your life's fairly straightforward and you don't have any other challenges, something like opening a new bank account doesn't have to be that complicated, but it can feel it if you haven't had to do it for a long time. And there's a whole risk element around how do you do so safely,
yes,
and so that nobody else gets that information.
yeah.
But I think just fundamentally as well, it's about having it, as we've already discussed, it's allowing somebody to have that feeling of control and to produce a budget that actually can be used to go forward is a very key part of that, isn't it? I think all of us feel at times where the money side of things it isn't feeling secure. It can feel very much as though the sands are shifting under your feet.
Yes,
And we need to get people back on that.
And I think it's important for people to recognise the level of debt that we might be talking about here, in terms of, we're not just talking about somebody having, a credit card with a little bit of money on. We're talking about figures that have a huge impact on people's lives for a long period of time to come, unless they deal with this at the appropriate time.
Yeah, and so we see, clients who come through to us typically will owe somewhere in the region of £20,000, and it may take them quite a long time to pay those debts back. But as we've said already, it's important to do so at a rate that you can afford, and it does happen. We have thousands of people every year successfully paying off their debts, and just that overwhelming feeling of relief, when the debts are cleared, it's very moving to see. But even sort of just 6 months on, having that, the regular payments going out and things feeling much more settled is such a big win, because it doesn't have to then dominate your thinking. It just becomes another sort of expenditure item that is going out, and it's dealt with.
Yes.
So it can feel as though there are, the progress can be made. So and it's not just about debt, is it? I mean, there's also stuff around limiting people's ability to earn, more control over the way they spend their cash.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's often overlooked is that when somebody has been in a controlling situation, if they're at work, one of the things that may have happened is that they will have been prevented from maybe accessing training, accessing career development, and therefore their ability to earn has been limited. And if they've been in that situation for quite some time, if they come to leave the situation, their confidence to apply for a new job, to move into a new area of work, to be able to work and earn money again at a level that they may have been at had that not happened. We see so many people that just don't feel they can do that. They can't move forward. They can't get promotions. And that all adds to the worry of, how am I ever going to work again? And if we then look at the situation at the moment, where we've had so many people that have been made unemployed during this whole COVID experience, people are more fearful than ever about how they're going to ever have a living wage moving forward.
So if you had somebody who's listening to this who thinks, do you know, that sounds like me, what are the main things that you'd say to them?
The first thing is to reach out and ask for help. Nobody's going to judge you. Nobody's going to make any, any sort of decisions immediately. It's about working with you safely, as we've both mentioned that word safe. It's about putting a safety plan in place. And for us, the safety plan is around that whole safeguarding message. What is your home circumstances? Who else is involved in what is going on? Are you in immediate danger? Do we need to get you out and relocate you quickly? Or is this a longer term process that we need to work through? And if we are then made aware that there is debt as well, we would then link them with you through the channels, the referral channels that we've both got in place.
Yeah.
The thing is just to say to people as well that if you're sitting there and what you're hearing is something that's happened to you historically, so the abuse isn't current, you can still come to us. We are not just there for crisis cases, we're there to support anybody. So your abuse might have happened 20, 30 years ago, but you've never actually talked to anybody about it. And you've still got some low level debt that's ticking along alongside that. Please reach out to us and talk to us. It doesn't matter when it happened. We're still
No.
to help.
And I think at the moment, because people have been very isolated at home, a lot of feelings that have been stored in there are particularly coming out now, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things is that what we know that if somebody doesn't ask you the question, then you're not likely to reach out and say, please help me. But what we're trying to do with these discussions and being more visible and making ourselves more available to people is by saying, we are asking you the question, reach out to us, please, please get in touch, give us a call. And you only have to make one call. That's the joy of our relationship, is you only have to make one call, because we will pass you on through the other half of the service. So you only need to ask once.
Yeah. And I think as well, the other thing that has stuck with me that I probably learned from my very first conversation with you is, if you think that a friend or a family member or somebody else might be experiencing these problems, is just to, if it's safe to do so, ask them, because often these opportunities are missed. And it might feel awkward, it might feel embarrassing, but so what? What's the worst that's going to happen? As long as you're not putting them at risk, ask them.
Yes, absolutely. And particularly as well, think about your colleagues, think about people that you work with, people that you socialise with, because sometimes you're asking your family is the hardest thing to do, and admitting to your family is the hardest thing to do. But being in an opportunity where somebody, you could mention it at work, and one of the things that we've talked an awful lot in the 2 years is around making your workplace a very safe place. Anybody in your workplace knows they could come and talk to a colleague about it if that was the only safe place to do so. And so many other organisations could make that available for people.
Yeah.
Because telling your own parents or your own sister or brother is not easy, but talking to somebody that you know at work might be the safe place to do it. So
and I think certainly for anybody who might be watching who is responsible for teams who work for them, then again, I think we've learned a lot over the last couple of years, and we'd be happy to share those experiences. And similarly, I know with some of the financial organisations that we've spoken to, they've got a lot more bold over the last sort of 6 to 9 months, and just say to people, how are you doing? Are you okay? And it's such a big lifeline. We need to get over this awkwardness and raise the subject. And I think just the sort of final thing that I wanted to add to you is that it's important that anybody who is thinking about seeking help, not to let their financial concerns be that barrier, because in the scale of things, particularly with debt, sorting out debt is relatively simple compared to how people perceive it's going to be. There's nothing that we can't fix when it comes to a debt problem. The important thing is that we look after you, your family, and those that you care about. And really, debts in relation to that, aren't that important. What's important is that we can get you into a situation where you can live again financially without the burden of that debt. And that's more important. So it doesn't need to be the barrier. And in a situation of control, it can probably, it must feel like that. But it shouldn't be the barrier that stops you from seeking help.
No. And I mean, reaching out to anybody that's listening today that feels that they've got some debt problem, it's not embarrassing anymore to talk about it. As you said, you see so many people, you have contact with so many people, and it's one of the things that we can actually do something about, and we can get that work started very quickly in terms of your financial support. The other support might be longer term. The impact of the debt in terms of your mental health may take us longer to resolve. But if you know somebody's dealing with the financial side of it for you, then that's got to be a big step forward. So.
Yeah. Very few people come to us and just say, I've got a debt problem and I don't have a mental health issue or something else going on. If only life were that simple. So there is no judgment out there. Those days are gone. So in terms of sort of follow up to this, so from a debt point of view, we've got payplan.com that anybody can access, and there's a wealth of information on there, including how to seek help. You've got your own website, haven't you? If you just want to mention the address.
If you go to broxtowewomensproject.org.uk and have a look at that, and obviously all the social media channels are on there that we use to send out messages all the time, that you can find out how to access us, and there's links on the website to some of the resources we've been talking about today. So
yeah, good. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. It's been really good to catch up, and I know we'll continue working together.
We certainly will. Looking forward to it.
Thanks. Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.